Chapter 102. Let's continue. I'll be your driver for free today. You can treat me later or you can tell my fortune or something. Can psychics tell fortunes? Telling the location of an enemy. Asking for the location of a goddess. This is also changing fate. Why isn't it called fortune-telling? Crackburst grinned in laughter. He looked down the car window and saw Ink's earnest appearance. He couldn't help but reach out to pinch Ink's neck. Hey, do you feel like you're being petted on the head? Luonan wouldn't tell him that Ink was just a cover to coax him. He simply replied, "Stop messing around." But Luonan's all-encompassing mental senses were inexplicably touched. The window of the blue MPV in front had clearly opened up a crack. It was as if something was ejecting out. It was extremely small and its speed was very fast. It collided with the car behind it in practically an instant. Then the senses were interrupted. The Tiger Burst Jeep and the blue MPV were separated by two cars. The senses were interrupted twice. When they reappeared, they were already on the hood of the Tiger Burst Jeep. Luonan's mental senses always had a resolution problem. This time was no exception. He could only faintly sense that it was a tiny beetle-like object. It seemed to have pierced through the two cars in the middle before pouncing onto the Tiger Burst Jeep. Then he completely lost his senses. At this time, all four windows of the Jeep rose up, forming a sealed space. Without the whistling of the wind outside, the rumbling of heavy metal was much more ear-piercing. Crackburst was a bit startled. He snapped his fingers, "Open the window." The voice control command was given, but the car's AI didn't respond at all. Not only that, but the car even began to slow down and turn. Luonan's warning cut in, "Careful, there's something. F***ck me. I've been bewitched." Crackburst cursed at practically the same time, but he soon calmed down. In the next few seconds he tried using hand control, voice control and other methods, but it was useless. The windows couldn't be opened, the speed couldn't be changed, and even the stereo couldn't be adjusted. The car's AI firmly controlled the Tiger Burst Jeep. It turned into a downward trajectory, circling around the skyscraper and spiraled down. "Is it a virus?" Crackburst judged. "No, it's more like a mechanical bug." Luonan spoke of his observations. "In any case, someone is controlling it from a distance." Crackburst came up with the most reasonable explanation. "We've been discovered." Aside from Crackburst and Luonan, no one could see that the AI in this arrogant and domineering military-modified Tiger Burst had already gone out of control. The Jeep moved steadily along with the rolling traffic, but it was getting further and further away from its target. At this moment, Crackburst and Ink were imprisoned in this sealed space. They didn't know where they would be taken. Crackburst stopped all of his attempts to seize back control. He swept his eyes over the constantly changing environment outside the car. His eyes unexpectedly flickered with an exceptionally excited light, and the corners of his mouth perked up once more. He turned his head to Moshui. "You must have been discovered, but they are targeting this car. You can continue." As soon as he finished speaking, he heavily elbowed the car window beside him. The tough bulletproof glass instantly exploded into fine cracks like a spider web. If intelligence wasn't enough, violence would make up the difference. Crackburst's eyes didn't even blink when he treated his beloved car in such a manner. He extended his hand and tore down the glass window that was already on the verge of collapse. He casually tossed it into the back seat. His other hand suddenly grabbed Ink. He didn't care how the bird struggled and he simply tossed it out the window. "Go. Don't let me down." Ink was forcefully tossed several dozen meters away, just in time to avoid the downward trajectory of light. It spread its wings just in time to avoid the tragedy of smashing into the glass curtain wall of the building. Luonan shouted through the hexa ear, "What the hell are you doing? I want to know what they're doing." Crackburst laughed boldly. His bored attitude from before was completely swept away. "You go keep an eye on them first. Keep in touch. I want to see where they can take me." He extended his hand out from the broken window and waved. Then a hoarse and berserk roar rang out, "Smash your chest open. Embrace the gentleness of blood." Oh. Ink spiraled within the neon-glowing mist. Luonan's soul body hovered motionlessly in the center of Ink's spiraling and fluttering axis. 2 seconds ago, the blue Jeep carrying Yen Yonghua had left the range of his senses. Actually, if he really wanted to give chase, he could easily catch up to them with the speed of his soul body flying through space. However, so what if he caught up? The anti-reconnaissance equipment on the jeep raised Luo Nan's vigilance greatly. If he continued to forcefully chase after them, not only would he alert the enemy, but he would also expose his identity and abilities. Luo Nan's thoughts spun rapidly, and he made a decision in the blink of an eye. Crag Burst was clearly worth paying more attention to. Yan Yonghua had taken the initiative to help. Right now the jeep had gone out of control and Luo Nan was in danger. Luo Nan would feel uneasy if he didn't help. Also, Luo Nan was quite concerned about that mechanical bug. Luo Nan's soul body suddenly descended, carrying ink as it chased behind the Tiger Burst jeep. The Tiger Burst jeep maintained a stable speed, and its direction was the same from start to finish. The jeep continued to descend after changing tracks twice to switch traffic layers. The tyrannical body of the jeep continuously ran parallel to several low-altitude public transport vehicles. They intersected and plunged head-first into the suddenly dimmed layer. The jeep passed through the dividing line between light and darkness. The clamor of the metropolis was suddenly separated by a layer in everyone's senses. Even the heavy metal vibrating within the jeep seemed to be rendered with a layer of irritation. The jeep's headlights cut through the outer walls of the surrounding buildings. The damaged outer walls, the messy graffiti, and some suspicious black and red colors converged together. The recycling layer. Due to the phototaxis of living things, people would always yearn for areas with fresh air and sunlight. This was especially true in the bustling area of the city center. The skyscrapers were dense, and the low-altitude transportation network extended in all directions. The residents of the city would go up and down. Sometimes they wouldn't truly set foot on the ground for several years. A low-altitude public transport 30 meters above the ground was already the limit for most people to descend. This was how the high-altitude race got their name. The problem was that Xia City was an enormous city with a population of 200 million. It never had the qualifications to waste space. It was inevitable that there would be some people within the population of 200 million who had to survive in the dark and damp space of the lower levels. Without a doubt, this was the slum of the modern city. It was the recycling layer that specialized in disposing of the city's trash. To a certain degree, it was also a place where gangs gathered outside the law. The Tiger Burst jeep roared as it charged down from the upper levels. It practically instantly attracted the gazes of a large number of professionals in this gloomy space. A sharp whistling sound rang out. Between the buildings within the ever-narrowing alleys, high-powered modified motorcycles started up one after another. They sped along at high speed. People of all shapes and sizes on the motorcycles brandished malevolent spiked clubs, chains and of course firearms. They howled and cursed at the jeep that was still advancing along the light rail in midair. At the same time, they were also looking forward to it. Chapter 103. The light rail ahead has been destroyed. Automatically switching to off-road mode. The car's AI automatically issued an order. Several seconds later, the enormous Tiger Burst jeep slid down from the final port. Its four wheels landed on the ground, and it rolled over the primitive and shabby asphalt road as it continued forward. 20 to 30 people had already gathered together. They were the nearby gangs and motorcycle gang members. They cheered in unison. There were even more daring people who sped up and used their spikes to push against the side of the jeep. They sped up, leaving behind clear and distorted scratches on the jeep's body. And when they passed by the car window, they made a humiliating gesture towards Crag Burst. "You pig flaunting your wealth. I'm going to poke your ass until it explodes." Crag Burst cracked a smile and returned the same gesture. "Come. I'm afraid you're not tough enough." The curses outside grew even louder, but Crag Burst didn't care in the slightest. He looked all around him, comparing the surroundings to his memories from his early years. If he remembered correctly, the road the jeep was driving on had nearly 30 years of history. It was originally designed to be some sort of main road in the city. Moreover, it was connected to some transportation route in the wilderness. It was a two-way road with 12 lanes. No matter how you looked at it, it was a fairly high standard. But in the decades that followed, enormous changes occurred in the city's planning. Countless skyscrapers rose from the ground, and their shadows covered the road from all sides. The buildings protruded horizontally, cutting the enormous road into fragments. They completely covered the sky above the road. Following the complete abandonment of the management of the recycling stratum, This road could only be submerged in the layers of shadows of the skyscrapers. The illegal buildings of the surrounding residents wantonly covered both sides of the road. At this moment, there were countless eyes within those grotesquely shaped buildings. They stared intently at the jeep that whistled past. It was hard to understand what they meant. So many years have passed and this damned place is still a mess. What are the gangs in charge of this area doing? Cragburst placed his arm across the empty car window frame and shouted towards the outside. Hey, whose territory is this? Don't you guys usually clean up? The gang members outside the jeep paused for a moment. Then their threats and curses grew louder by more than 10 times. There were already people who couldn't bear it any longer. They drove their motorcycles closer and the sound of air being cut rang out. A thick and long steel chain lashed through the car window. It was a force that could split a person's skull open. Cragburst just lifted his arm and let the chain smash against it. He even coiled it twice before swinging it slightly. The person who attacked was like a kite that had lost control. He flew from his beloved high-displacement motorcycle and was smashed horizontally. This was too ruthless. The motorcycles at the back couldn't dodge in time. In an instant, half of the motorcycles were flipped over. It was a mess. Modified humans. No one knew who shouted this, but the motorcycles that accompanied them all the way dispersed. Some people had already braked and stopped on the spot, no longer following them. But at this moment, a motorcycle that was originally behind them sped up and soon ran alongside the off-road vehicle. The rider grinned maliciously at the car, raised the thick barrel with one hand and pulled the trigger. The classic shotgun instantly ejected 12 8mm tungsten alloy pellets, covering the entire front of the carriage. Without even looking at the result, the knight swung his arm and loaded the gun. He was about to do it again. But when he raised the muzzle of the gun once more, what met the muzzle was Cragburst's malevolent smile. Cragburst's face was completely unharmed. There was a muffled bang as the rider flew up from the motorcycle. He crossed 8 lanes of traffic and flew into the illegal buildings at the far end. Cragburst leapt out from the car window and took his place. He sat steadily on the motorcycle and snatched the classic shotgun. He roared and used the shotgun like an iron rod. He rushed forward and rushed back, knocking down a group of reckless gangsters in the blink of an eye. He had been cooped up in the car for over 10 minutes, acting as a moving prisoner. That feeling wasn't good at all. The motorcycle beneath him was a bit small compared to his body size, but the feeling of being able to move according to his will and move at will was really great. Cragburst laughed heartily and accompanied the Tiger Burst off-road vehicle. He roared to his heart's content along with the surging melody. As the vehicle advanced forward, the gangsters who had fallen to the ground quickly disappeared without a trace. Only Cragburst and the off-road vehicle remained on the road for a time. Cragburst was singing to his heart's content when he suddenly stooped down and accelerated without any warning. He pulled away at least a body's length of distance in an instant. He caught a glimpse of a line of fire cutting through from the corner of his eye. A hole the size of a wash basin appeared on the road 20 meters behind him. Only then did he hear a peculiar hissing sound enter his ears. Cragburst chuckled. It was a large-caliber electromagnetic rifle. However, the shooter's aim was terrible to the extreme. That's not right. The shooter didn't have any intention of following up after missing the target. He suddenly sensed something and followed the trajectory of the bullet. He couldn't see any human figures within the pitch-black floor, but there was a pitch-black bird flapping its wings and flying. Cragburst grinned and transmitted through the hexa ear. Where's the division of labor? Where's the trust? Speaking of which, you should be pretty good at scouting. How about we go back and give the wilderness a try? Then you need to be prepared to be tricked. Luo Nan casually replied. He used ink to announce his existence to Cragburst. But what truly killed the sniper was actually the human-faced arachnid siege hammer. Right now, the pitiful fellow had fainted in front of the window. He probably didn't understand what was going on from start to finish. Luo Nan's sole body floated within this dangerous area. The range of his senses was close to a kilometer in diameter. An omnidirectional, multi-layered, panoramic picture was presented to him. He suddenly discovered that he should be the most genuine sniper at this very moment. He was in existence like a ghost. He had a panoramic perception with a diameter of a kilometer. Of course, he also had the siege hammer, which could ignore the vast majority of physical defenses. These factors converged together. He could be said to be like a fish in water in this complex environment. He could eliminate those malicious personnel in the quickest and most convenient manner. Luo Nan truly had some awareness of being an ability user when he used these methods. Yes, this was the ability user of his imagination. This was an extraordinary power that stood above the normal world. Naturally, this was the best proof of the correctness of formatting theory. It was also at this time that Luo Nan truly understood what kind of restriction his weak fleshly body was when it came to his true abilities. Hey Scout. Go ahead and update your intelligence. This instance's level is too low. Did your enemy specifically use this place to annoy me? Luo Nan responded, I feel like you should stop the car and properly inspect it. Maybe you can find some clues. Good idea. But this doesn't contradict with scouting ahead. I need a tool. It's best if it's a moving obstacle that can stop my disobedient baby. Let me look. Chapter 104. Crag Burst's military-modified Tiger Burst SUV was an extremely astonishing vehicle for personal transportation. It could run over the heads of ordinary private cars in its off-road mode. However, the big fellow that had just run into the range of Luo Nan's mental senses could completely replicate a similar scene onto the Tiger Burst SUV. 5 seconds after Luo Nan discovered it, the enormous shadow that slowly pressed over finally attracted Crag Burst's attention. The enormous size of the shadow caused Crag Burst, who had been wild and fearless the entire time, to gape subconsciously. He forgot to speak for a time. It was a super heavy road roller. It was over 5 meters tall, and its enormous body occupied 2 car lanes horizontally. It was completely the willful piling of industrial power. Just the vibrating wheels in front of it already exceeded the roof of the Tiger Burst SUV. Perhaps this big fellow was a large tool used in the construction of this main road back in the day. Its appearance was already extremely old. The driver's compartment was already missing its top, and its entire body was covered in grotesque graffiti. However, it had undergone certain modifications. Long and sharp blades were installed on both sides of the vibrating wheels. This allowed it to cover the width of over 4 car lanes. The weight of the vehicle was at least 50 tons. The already damaged asphalt road became even more tragic under the effect of the vibrating wheels as it drove past. Of course, the antique road roller's speed was very ordinary. It definitely didn't exceed 30 kilometers per hour. If the SUV were to turn around, it would be completely easy for this old fellow to eat the dust behind it. Or it could make a small detour and easily pass by it. But the problem was that the AI that controlled the SUV's movements didn't have any awareness that it was about to be smashed into pieces. It continued to maintain its original speed, direction, and route as it moved forward in a perfectly straight line. Hey. Crag Burst did his best to wake his precious up, but it was destined to be futile. The distance between the two sides quickly became 300 meters. 200 meters. The Tiger Burst SUV contributed to the majority of the distance traveled, and it continued to do so. Luo Nan noticed that there were at least 5 gun-wielding personnel in the damaged compartment of the road roller other than the driver. They all raised their gun barrels and pointed them at Crag Burst's position. 2 of them were electromagnetic rifles with astonishing destructive power. Only the heavens knew how these strictly controlled military firearms ended up here. Did the military also dispose of trash here? Out of the way. Luo Nan threw 2 siege hammers over as he warned Crag Burst. The targets were precisely 2 gang members wielding electromagnetic rifles. One of them fell to the ground and fainted. But a bewitching red light suffused the eyes of the other person. He was actually completely unaffected. He quickly adjusted the muzzle of his gun and flames exploded on it. The metal bullet carried a terrifying initial speed. It crossed a distance of several hundred meters in an instant, directly piercing through the location of Luo Nan's soul body. This shot did not touch anything substantial, but it truly gave Luo Nan a fright. The other party's spiritual sense was very sharp, and his judgment was very accurate. What was even more inconceivable was that he was immune to the siege hammer. Luo Nan had pierced through all of his material defenses, but it seemed that Luo Nan's attack aimed at the mental plane had missed. That gunshot had alarmed Crag Burst. The other 3 firearms had already opened fire at this time. They were old-fashioned gunpowder weapons that were commonly seen in the black market. Their power was quite astonishing. Crag Burst cursed loudly. The motorcycle suddenly sped up and swerved outwards, dodging the whistling rain of bullets. It narrowly brushed past the twisted blades of the road roller. Luonan was left behind. Cragburst let the motorcycle run away crookedly. Cragburst jumped up and his strong body easily leapt over 4 meters into the air. He directly stepped onto the cockpit of the road roller and smashed it with a heavy fist. The driver was sent flying from the other side. Only now did the others adjust their muzzles. But no one was able to block Cragburst's fist. They fell from the road roller one after another. Cragburst instantly cleared the obstructions. Then he tried to control the big fellow beneath him to make it stop immediately. As long as it didn't move, Cragburst's beloved Tigerburst Jeep wouldn't be smashed into smithereens even if it couldn't avoid a collision. The distance between the two vehicles was less than 50 meters at this time. A collision and a crushing would only take 2 or 3 seconds. Cragburst had operated this type of large-scale machine before. He felt that he could do it. But then Luonan's sharp warning sound penetrated the bottom of his heart in the form of psychic waves. Dodge. Luonan's lack of professionalism was completely exposed at this critical moment. Though he gave a warning, he didn't indicate the direction of danger. Cragburst needed to make his own judgment. Fortunately, Cragburst had ample experience. He was able to discern the degree of danger from Luonan's hasty attitude. He didn't hesitate at all and leaped out from the cockpit. He didn't even stop on the road roller, he just flipped over. A plump metal pineapple was tossed into the air at nearly the same time as his movements. It fell right into the cockpit. Faster, Xikami. Cragburst was shocked when he saw this scene from the corner of his eyes. Grenade. And it was a defensive grenade with the most terrifying killing radius. This sort of crude old-fashioned weapon had an enormous destructive power. It still had a certain place in the military. It could receive miraculous effects in special situations. The grenade was clearly pressed in someone's hand. The person had calculated the time to ignite it. It exploded with a bang while still in midair. Over 1,000 shrapnel were like a whistling storm, covering a vast space of 50 meters. With such an astonishing killing radius, even the gang members who had just fallen from the car were swept up. They screamed miserably. Cragburst wasn't known for his agility, but his mind worked quickly. He borrowed the force to rebound just as his body landed on the ground. He caught up to the road roller with a stride and stuck his body to the side of the car. His series of judgments couldn't be said to be incorrect, but someone was waiting for him here. A fist came smashing straight at him. The fist's speed and timing were all grasped to the peak of perfection. But the most shocking thing was the inconceivable weight. Cragburst received it with a single hand, but his entire upper arm was forcibly deflected. He could only watch helplessly as the heavy fist smashed into the side of his face. Cragburst soared into the air amidst the flying shrapnel and tumbled to a spot a dozen meters behind the road roller. An enormous rumbling sound came from right in front of the road roller at this time. The 5-ton Tigerburst Jeep collided with the 50-ton road roller at a speed of nearly 100 kilometers per hour. The former's kinetic energy was reduced to 0 in an instant. The front of the car caved in and parts exploded in the air. It was a tragic sight to behold. Although the road roller didn't immediately roll over the Jeep, it maintained its previous speed after a slight pause. It continued to push the scrapped Jeep forward. More and more parts of the Jeep were swept up by the vibrating wheels. It seemed that the most miserable fate was unavoidable. Luonan had witnessed everything that had happened before and after the road roller. He was stunned for a time. But at this moment his attention was placed on the person who had caused all of this. Yes, it was the person who had ignored the human-faced arachnid siege hammer attack. The person who had played dead when Cragburst boarded the car. Then the person who had tossed out a defensive grenade and seized the opportunity to strike Cragburst down with a heavy punch. Now the person had jumped from the road roller onto the Tigerburst Jeep. Chapter 105. Luonan was already able to clearly see the person's appearance. He was a white man, a rare sight in Xia City. He looked to be in his 40s, maybe a bit older. The scars on his face showed that he had been through a lot. Of course, Luonan had a deeper impression of this person's left eye. It was a mechanical eye. If one looked closely, they would find that there were no decorations on it. The cold metal structure, as well as the red light in the center that made one's heart tremble, made it difficult for one to treat it with a normal heart. This guy isn't a normal human. Luo Nan's mental senses had been covering the target this entire time. He discovered that this person's appearance was just as it indicated. The metal composition and related structures on this person's body were far greater than that of a normal person. They're modified humans, right? Cough cough, damn it. Cragburst's voice came through the hex ear. Cragburst had been struck down from the car by a fist and had been covered by the destructive shrapnel of the grenade. If Cragburst had been a normal person, he would have died a long time ago. However, Cragburst had reported his safety to Luo Nan at the first instant. Cragburst also understood the relevant information of the enemy, displaying his robust physique and experienced. Modified humans? Luo Nan had some understanding of the relevant concepts. He saw that there was still some time before Cragburst would catch up, so he used his senses to scan in greater detail while exchanging information with Cragburst. You're saying that he's like the military's mechanical warriors? What mech warrior? He's just a modified human. There's no other way to describe it, and this modification has been abolished for almost 20 years, at least on the surface. Is he over 40 years old? Yeah, pretty much. That should be it. He's pretty good at using military equipment and he's pretty good at scamming people. But a guy like him must have special privileges. He has to report to the SEA every year. Why is he here? Cragburst felt that this was incomprehensible, and so did Luo Nan. The gang members of the recycling stratum might seem lawless, with all kinds of weapons, guns and grenades, making it a mini arsenal, but that was because the government had basically given up on the governance of the recycling stratum. As a matter of fact, most of them had extremely low clearance due to their criminal records. Under the strict control of the credit clearance network in today's society, they could only be tyrants on the recycling stratum. Once they stepped out of the recycling stratum and into the public, they would be closely monitored. If they did anything sensitive, law enforcement officers would appear above their heads and send them to jail. It was hard to imagine that a special forces soldier who had undergone military modification would come here to make a living. His special authority was as eye-catching as a lighthouse on the SCA's surveillance network. The government would never allow such a dangerous person to work with the gangs in the recycling stratum. As for special situations like committing a monstrous crime, it would be more meaningful for them to escape into the wilderness instead of here. No matter what, this guy has angered me. I will have a good talk with him. Cragburst gnashed his teeth on the other side. But soon after he slapped his thigh. Found it. It's here. Keep an eye on him, I'll be right there. He found the high-powered motorcycle that had fallen in the middle of the road, turned around and chased after it. In about half a minute he would be able to fight for his reputation again. Luo Nan focused his attention on the altered human. Actually, Luo Nan was more interested in this person's current behavior than in identifying his identity. After striking down Cragburst, the altered human arrived atop the heavily deformed jeep. It tore apart the roof and entered the driver's compartment, which could no longer be seen. Next, the altered human smashed the control panel with a punch. He extended his hand inside and fished for something. Luo Nan couldn't help but associate this scene with the loss of control of the car's AI and the metal bug ejected from Yan Yongbo's car. Without a doubt, Yan Yongbo had done something to the jeep. His methods were certainly closely related to the metal bug that had sunk into the jeep. From then on, the development of the situation deviated from the normal track. And right now this altered human seemed to be acting as a liaison, a recycler retrieving the metal bug. This kind of behavior was quite compatible with the recycling stratum. And from this point of view, perhaps the metal bug was a very crucial thing. Perhaps it involved some deep secrets of Yan Yongbo's? Luo Nan's mental senses became even more meticulous when he thought of this. Though his soul body couldn't do much right now, he wanted to lock onto the target of the other first before considering his next step. The altered human was certainly aware of his detection, just like how he had sensed the siege hammer. However, his thirst for his target clearly surpassed everything else. He just raised his head and shot a cold glance, but he didn't actually lock onto Luo Nan's position. He just continued to lower his head and search. Suddenly, the altered human's arm that had extended into the control panel paused for a moment. His cold and stiff face had a change, forming into a slightly sinister smile. Then he pulled his hand out. His fingertips were pinched with a metal bug the size of a grain of rice. It was motionless right now, more like a work of art than a tool. The altered human raised the metal bug before his eyes. It was like he was looking at a treasure, carefully sizing it up. The smile on his face deepened with every glance. The intensity of the red light in his mechanical eyes continued to grow. Luo Nan took advantage of the metal bug's appearance to use his mental senses to cut across its surface in an attempt to understand its internal structure. But he discovered that it wasn't easy to balance distance and precision at the same time. He was separated by a distance of over 100 meters, and the precision of his senses was at most on the millimeter level. It was already very difficult for him to analyze the interior of the jeep. Right when Luo Nan was considering whether or not he should get a bit closer, a high-powered motorcycle rumbled from behind the road roller. Soon it circled around the reamer and ran alongside the deformed jeep. Crag Burst gave a provocative gesture to the driver's seat atop the motorcycle. "Hey, come at me again if you have the guts. I'll let you use only one hand." The altered human, a smile faintly faded. His ice-cold mechanical eyes cut to Crag Burst's side, but he didn't immediately respond. Crag Burst's provocation continued, but it was mixed with something else. Crag Burst used to be from District 55 of the Coastal Garrison. Give me your name. I'll burn incense for you later. The altered human's lips and teeth opened and closed slightly within the jeep's driver's seat. He spoke for the first time, but the feeling was that he was mocking Crag Burst. "A soldier? You're not?" Crag Burst discovered that there was a problem with his judgment, so there was no need for him to be polite. He was just about to exert his strength to leap and attack. But in the next moment his opponent made an odd move. The altered human opened his mouth and stuck out his tongue. He placed the metal bug between his fingers on it, rolled it up and sent this toy into his mouth. There was even a clear swallowing motion. He actually swallowed the metal bug. Chapter 106. As soon as he finished speaking, Black Jack leaped up and jumped down from the other side of the cockpit. His timing was perfect. At that moment, the road roller pushed the jeep to the place where the gang member's car had been flipped over. At that moment the group of people had yet to leave. They stayed in the middle of the road and looked at the road roller that was moving slowly towards them. At first they were dumbfounded. Then they shouted and wanted to drive their motorcycles around it. But at that moment Jack jumped down from the jeep and grabbed a motorcycle. He then sped up, circled around the other side of the blade and sped back in the direction he came from. "You were a boss just a second ago and now you're dodging?" Crag Burst cursed loudly. He lifted the front wheel of the motorcycle and forcefully made a U-turn. The motorcycle scraped dangerously past the twisting blades, and then the engine roared as it accelerated in pursuit. The speed of the two motorcycles was more than 100 kilometers per hour. In the darkness of the night, they disappeared in the blink of an eye. It wasn't a problem for Luo Nan's soul body to chase after them, but Ink had some difficulties. The two motorcycles had already driven out of his range of senses during his moment of hesitation, and they chased after them. On this side, the road roller pushed the off-road vehicle, rumbling as it rolled over. Everywhere he passed there was a mess. The gang members cut a sorry figure as they hid to the side of the road. They cursed Crag Burst, but even more cursed Jack. Luo Nan's mind stirred slightly. He listened attentively and discovered that some of the content was very interesting. But it was fragmented. He was unable to grasp the gist of it. Because of his attention, Ink also came over and it was very eye-catching. One of the gang members was annoyed and happened to have a gun in his hand. He raised his hand and was about to shoot, but in the blink of an eye he fell to the ground like a wooden stake, unconscious. The gang members who had been happily scolding him were all stunned. They looked at their comrade who had suddenly fainted, then looked up in a daze. At this moment, Ink spiraled down and stopped on the eaves of an illegal building by the side of the road. It looked down at the group of weak chickens known as the gang. In the darkness, the black crows stared at you with their dark eyes. On the ground were their companions who had inexplicably fallen because they had offended them. Such a scene made the dozen or so members of the gang at the scene all weak in the knees. Crow continued to remain silent, and the more it was like this, the more anxious and uneasy it was. Luo Nan actually felt a bit awkward being by Ink's side. He didn't want to stare at each other like this. Gathering information was the most important thing right now. The problem was that Ink was a crow. How could it communicate with humans? It would be better if it was a parrot. He could see the benefits of the Xianxia and the psychic wave network right now. Otherwise, he and Cragburst wouldn't have been able to connect. Oh, psychic wave network? Luo Nan's train of thought jumped once more. If it was just a network connection, then the heavily chained crow within the format pyramid would also count. At this moment, there was an additional image of a crow in the format pyramid. It was ink and it was on the second level, which was the staff level. Of course Luo Nan didn't understand bird language, but his communication with ink was telepathic. There were no obstructions at all. Even with the foundation of hypnosis, the smooth communication between the man and the bird was beyond common sense. If it could be done between humans and crows, what couldn't it be done between humans? Luo Nan made a decision as soon as his thoughts reached this point. First, he needed to establish a connection and use the heavily chained crow. But what value did these gang members have in absorbing them? Luo Nan was still a bit of a neat freak. He hesitated for a moment before his thoughts spun. Perhaps he could use something else instead? The human-faced arachnid's gloomy, cold, and bizarre gaze swept across the group of gang members. Of course, none of the gang members were able to see the human-faced arachnid. But being targeted by that bizarre crow was enough to make them panic. The group of people were stuck between a rock and a hard place when the crow suddenly spread its wings and screeched. It was hoarse and unpleasant to listen to, causing everyone to shiver. More importantly, a weak yet inexplicably clear voice directly rang out in the depths of their minds at the same time this screech rang out. It coiled at the bottom of their hearts. I ask. Answer. Oh my God. Miserable and panic-stricken cries rang out. Some people turned around and ran. At the same time, there were also people who didn't make a sound. Their eyes rolled back as they fell to the ground. This time Luo Nan really didn't do anything. This brother was the one who fainted from fright. Of course, the gang members who tried to escape soon received a siege hammer that was neither light nor heavy. They didn't faint, but they were in great pain. They fell to the ground, clutching their heads as they screeched. From start to finish, they saw this savage and bizarre scene. The gang members literally froze to death on the spot. Monsters, mutants, black technology. All sorts of absurd thoughts came and went, but they really didn't dare to move their feet. The road roller rumbled away into the distance, gradually disappearing. The road surface was silent for a time. I ask. You answer. Luo Nan repeated his previous words. At the same time he was also paying attention to the changes in the format pyramid. The human-faced arachnid was located on the technician level. It was currently the center of all the changes. Following Luo Nan's decision, this Darksider species spat out a spider silk-like thread, projecting it into the turbid flow of emotions. The human-faced arachnid was like a skilled fisherman. It used the spider silk to hook up fish one after another. It tossed them to the lowest level of the format pyramid to stand side by side with the images of Xie Junping and cat eyes. However, they were much fainter. They were like fragile bubbles that could burst at any time. In the real world there were over a dozen gang members. Without exception, all of them were brought under the control of the human-faced arachnid. There was nothing that could be easier than this when the emotions of fear spread wantonly. As the mastermind behind the scenes, this was the first time Luo Nan saw how the human-faced arachnid controlled its target. He was stupefied for a time, so it was actually this simple? In any case, with the establishment of the local area network, and the formation of the mental connection, the following matters would be much easier. A spiritual wave was transmitted from the Xianxia approximately 2 minutes later. Cragburst had taken the initiative to contact him. Fuck. Thought, where have you been? Luo Nan was able to guess the result just by listening to the emotions in her voice. You lost them. That black rat. He can't do anything else, but his ability to dig holes in alleys is top-notch, and he even shot from the back. Hey, where's the scouting ahead? Your speed is over 100. I can't keep up. Of course, Crow wasn't able to keep up. Luo Nan obviously wouldn't explain this to Cragburst. F***CK, 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 F***CK. Cragburst let out a string of expletives. You need to pick a useful one for your spirit attachment. You need to be fast. Something like a peregrine falcon or a spear falcon. Aren't they all good? What's with a crow? Luo Nan didn't get angry despite Cragburst's complaints. The more Cragburst complained like this, the more it showed that this big guy who came from the military didn't treat Luo Nan as an outsider. Moreover, Crackburst began to trust and rely on Luo Nan's abilities. This was a very good start. Sure enough, Crackburst came to his senses and felt embarrassed. He coughed twice. Since I know you have this ability, I'll help you buy a good bird from the society later. As long as the price is right, it's not impossible to get a mutant. Sure. You can help me pick one later. Chapter 107. Who the hell knows where I am? Let me look at the map. Oh, River Wu District's Deshang building. The top looks bright and fresh, but the bottom looks like this? Luo Nan remembered that this was the information he had just obtained. It looked like Crackburst's pursuit ability couldn't be underestimated. They were already very close to their final target. Wait a moment. I'll be right there. Ink soared into the sky, shuttling back and forth between the intersecting buildings. Luo Nan's soul body rode the human-faced arachnid to the side. The crow's flying speed was really too slow. The human-faced arachnid didn't even use a third of its strength. It followed leisurely and leisurely. Luo Nan didn't put any energy into flying. Instead, he used the panoramic view of his mental senses to observe this dark place that he had heard of for a long time but had never set foot in. The turbid night of the recycling stratum gave him a very subtle feeling. At the very least, he didn't have too many experiences of flying in the night sky. It was more like he was swimming in a stream. And as time passed, the panoramic view cut open the deepest parts of this area and presented them before his eyes. This feeling continued to deepen and mutate. It wasn't just water. It was sewage. Everything presented in the panoramic view. The concrete details were far too jumbled and messy. There was no time to analyze them one by one. However, the things that were briefly scanned, such as gangs, prostitutes, drug dealers, casinos, and the abstractions of violence, lust, greed, numbness, and so on, interweaved and dyed together to form countless turbid colors that splashed over his head and face. Everything converged into a roaring turbid current that washed over the entire recycling stratum. It converged into the surging tide of emotions that drowned the entire Xia city. In the end, this was just a tributary. It was a bit dirtier. The human-faced arachnid was quite comfortable in this environment. It was like a fish in water. But soon Luo Nan discovered that the human-faced arachnid wandered in the turbid current of emotions. It had a slight appetite. Weren't these turbid negative emotions the food it craved the most in the past? This fellow relied on these sorts of things to grow stronger and stronger. But right now it seemed to be disdainful. Luo Nan tried to communicate with the human-faced arachnid. His analysis of the human-faced arachnid's information was far from complete. If he forced himself to understand it, there would be a lot of confusion and ambiguity. In the end, he could only confirm one thing. The human-faced arachnid had already undergone a certain level of evolution, so much so that its original food was no longer able to satisfy its needs. After all, there was no fish that relied on drinking water to survive. Perhaps the evolution of the human-faced arachnid was equivalent to a transition from a plankton to a fish. Should he congratulate her? Right when Luo Nan was racking his brains over the problem of the human-faced arachnid eating, the Deshang building was already in sight. Crackburst had been waiting impatiently for a long time. Right now he was standing on the 10th floor of the skyscraper, gazing into the distance. When he saw Ink flying over, he waved his hand excitedly from afar. "Hurry, I found an entrance here." Ink flapped its wings, searching for a place to land. How could Crackburst wait any longer? He pointed to his shoulder and said, "Over here, I guarantee your safety." Luo Nan wasn't polite with him. He gave Ink an order and directly descended onto Crackburst's shoulder. Immediately, the two of them began to exchange information. Everything below the 30th floor of the building, including the underground buildings, has a zigzag structure. The division between the inside and the outside is actually an isolation zone. Many of the buildings adjacent to the recycling stratum are built like this. Crackburst had researched quite a bit of information while he was waiting. The isolation zone is a one-way passageway. Security is tight and all permissions are locked down. There are no normal channels to enter the business district of the building from the recycling stratum. It's the same no matter who it is. Outside of the isolation zone is the world of the gangs. They have dug through countless rat holes here. They have dug through not just the Deshang building but the neighboring buildings as well. There are quite a few people living inside. Luo Nan listened to Cragburst's chatter and matched this part of the situation with his own understanding of the information. He organized his words and said, "According to the information I've obtained, there is an underground fighting arena here in the Dashang building. People often come here to participate in gambling fights. Many of them are big and wealthy guests who throw money away. Jack is the ace host and referee of the fighting arena. He might also be one of the bosses behind the scenes." Underground fighting. Cragburst's interest was immediately piqued when he heard the word fighting. "How come I've never heard of this before? I've been to practically all the fighting arenas in Xia City, public, private, legal and illegal. It's probably because this place is reserved for minors." The periphery of the Dashang building's isolation zone was just as Cragburst said. It was dirty, messy and crisscrossed with dark tunnels. Luo Nan was able to obtain a lot of useful information from the mouths of the gang members. In addition to the panoramic image support of his mental senses, Luo Nan was able to move more smoothly and freely than the gangs entrenched here. Cragburst originally had a belly full of anger because he was unsuccessful in his pursuit of Jack. He wanted to vent. But he never expected that Luo Nan would just cheat and open the map the moment he arrived. He only saw the shadows of the gang members chasing and weaving their way in and out, but he could only eat the dust from behind. The number of people he actually met was few and far between. It was hard for him to put his strength to use. He wasn't an idiot. Naturally, he could feel that Luo Nan wasn't just using the crow to scout. Instead, Luo Nan had a higher level of perception at play. "Good boy. There's something wrong with your ability. In terms of range, even cat eyes isn't this abnormal." Cat eyes. Luo Nan was quite interested in this unruly woman who suddenly appeared in his own pyramid. Since the intensity of their advance wasn't that great, he just asked casually, "What's the range of her long-range perception?" Her all-encompassing perception ranges from 50 to 70 meters. Her psychic perception has a limit of 3,720 kilometers when she's in a good state. "How much?" Luo Nan nearly choked awake. "Are you talking about kilometers or meters?" "It's kilometers without a doubt." Cragburst laughed out loud. "It's inconceivable, right? But this is the terrifying aspect of long-range perception. As long as the feeling comes, there's no reasoning with you. Back in the day, Cat Eyes did one of the most amazing things. She used her extrasensory psychic perception to guide a 1,000,000-ton nuclear-penetrating warhead. It smashed directly into the underground lair of the mutant species in the wilderness. It was a standard hit to the soul. A bunch of arrogant big shots from the military all knelt before her. Luo Nan didn't know what to say for a time. He had been proud of the range of his soul-body senses before, but he immediately encountered a standard that he could only look up to. But when he thought about it again, such an amazing person had actually entered his pyramid without a trace. She was more or less affected and suppressed by him. The feeling was quite subtle. Cragburst concluded, "In a certain sense, Cat Eyes' ability should be the closest type to that of a psychic, but it isn't that mysterious. Aside from being unstable and being powerless against the Darksider species, she practically doesn't have any other flaws. So by all means don't offend her. Otherwise she can find you in any corner of the city. She can take advantage of the time when you're in a dream." Crack. Cragburst made a motion of twisting Ink's neck and laughed loudly. He reached back to pinch Ink's head. "You really need to be careful. I felt that you and her seemed to be innately incompatible that day. But there's no way out." Chapter 108. The other side of the wall is the quarantine area. There's also an underground fighting arena. Cragburst couldn't see anything other than the white wall. But Luo Nan was different. His soul body had already passed through the wall. He had gone in and out of the building countless times. He was probably more clear about the layout inside than the designer. He combined the information he obtained earlier and explained to Cragburst. Originally, the quarantine area didn't allow for any other arrangements aside from surveillance and defense systems. But the management of the building made modifications in order to ensure the size of the area and the viewing effect. They occupied a portion of the surrounding area. This formed a fuzzy zone. The gangs of the recycling stratum can interact with the gamblers of the upper world. One side pays in money and the other side pays in manpower. Jack is one of the true controllers of this fuzzy zone. This is his lair and his cornucopia. Cragburst didn't ask for more details. As a man who frequently entered and exited the underground fighting arena, he was even more clear than Luo Nan about the inside of the building. The management of the building should be the house of bankers. Only through this place could one transform incorporeal credit into tangible wealth in the current society of credit and authority. But he didn't care about this at all. He was only interested in how to capture Jack. Jack is in the fighting arena, right? How do we get in? Do we smash a passageway out? Cragburst was a bit eager to give it a try. This is a passageway. It's used for emergency evacuation. The design is that it can only be opened from the inside. Luo Nan let ink flap its wings to wake up this bro whose brain was filled with violence. The problem was that it was completely ineffective. Roar roar. Let's be a bit more direct. Watch me. No. Wait. Wait a few more seconds. Luo Nan's voice had yet to fall when the white wall in front of him slid to one side. The inner layer of steel plates slid in the opposite direction. Only then did the ice-cold metal wall appear. But this wall also split open from the middle, revealing a dimly lit passageway. 3 layers of protection, especially the last layer that was 10 centimeters thick, made Cragburst speechless for a time. He didn't bring up using violence to open a passageway again. As for the passageway in front of them, it wasn't too long. One could see to the end with a glance. The door on the other side was half open. An even more intense light seeped in. There was also clamorous noise coming in. Clearly, the outside was a certain location of the underground fighting arena. Cragburst first looked at his feet. There was a person sitting down in the passageway. The person was already unconscious. He turned his head and looked around. Soon he found that there was a password plate on top of the man's head. The corresponding screen showed that the password plate had been successfully opened. You're a mole. Cragburst quickly corrected this preposterous thought, but the following conjecture was even more preposterous to him. Don't tell me that you controlled this guy through the wall and made him open the door? Bullseye. Speaking of which, the effects of hypnosis combined with the human-faced arachnid's fishing technique were quite decent. Luo Nan just chuckled through the hexa ear, maintaining a bit of a sense of mystery. He indicated to Cragburst to close this emergency passageway. This place was certainly connected to the control room. Though they couldn't hide it for too long, they could hide it for as long as they could. What the hell, this isn't just spirit attachment, it's some kind of ability enhancement. Actually, you can let the crow have some of your abilities, right? Do you have wizard blood? Or do you come from some secret order? Cragburst's thoughts were getting more and more outrageous. Luo Nan was really worried that the words, "his soul is in an out-of-body state," would come out of Cragburst's mouth. Luo Nan could only interrupt Cragburst once more. Let's speed things up. It's very likely that Jack is only using this place as a transit point. The isolated area can't enter the business district of Deshang Building, but there's a direct passageway to the upper city district. Cragburst immediately shut his mouth. He simply cleaned up the scene and passed through the passageway. There was a circular hallway outside. The curvature was extremely obvious, making people feel that the space was indeed limited. The operator of this place had indeed made use of the space to the extreme. On the concave side of the wall, there was a curved wall projection every now and then. On it there was an exciting scene in the arena. Sure enough, they're all kids. Cragburst's brows furrowed. He was a professional, so he felt vexed by the various scenes displayed on the screen. They have a certain amount of fighting techniques, but they're all competing in the dark and ruthless. They're trying to kill people. Many of the scenes of being knocked down on the screen had broken hands and feet, or they had been struck in a vital spot. Cragburst wouldn't even blink an eye at these things in the adult fighting world. But the 2 combatants on the screen didn't look to be older than 15, which was the same age as Luo Nan. They were a group of half-grown kids. They didn't hold back in the slightest. Did they really know what this represented? Many of them knew, judging by the ominous glint in their eyes. And the feeling brought about by this sort of warped thinking made people feel even more uncomfortable. The sound of footsteps came from both sides of the hallway at this time. Cragburst's intentions were to just go up and be done with it. But Luo Nan indicated for Cragburst to go to the other side, to a room with a thick curtain covering the door. Cragburst thought that this was the passageway to the fighting arena, but he discovered that it seemed to be a lounge after entering. The layout was very simple and crude. There were only wardrobes and benches. The passageway to the fighting arena was further inside. There was already a person in the lounge right now. He wore combat shorts and his upper body was bare. He didn't wear shoes and a towel was draped over his head. His face was drooping. It seemed that he was conserving his energy. He should be the next competitor to take the stage. He didn't have a coach or a friend by his side. He was all by himself. His entire body was cold and gloomy. He actually didn't react at all to Cragburst, the big guy who had suddenly barged in. Cragburst was a bit stupefied. Then he discovered that the room was actually very noisy. There was a display screen in the lounge as well, but it was a bit smaller than the one outside. The sound from the display screen was quite loud. It made people wonder what use this lounge could serve. The display screen just so happened to jump to a new scene at this time. "Look, Jack." Luo Nan reminded Cragburst to pay attention. The two's minds shook, but they soon discovered that this was just a video clip. Jack was wearing a referee uniform at the time. He wore a bow tie. His body was ramrod straight and he had a sense of propriety. Aside from the unsightly scars on his face, he looked more like a noble steward than a referee. It was no wonder that his hosting and refereeing were so popular. "This match isn't bad." Cragburst used a professional gaze to evaluate. "The tall and skinny one. His foundation is very solid. He has a sense of propriety in his attacks. He's a very good control-type competitor." "Hold on. There's something wrong with the editing." The editor had chosen this shot to be the scene of the tall and skinny kid slowing down, dodging and circling around, which Cragburst had praised. It was completely different from the intense fighting scene before. Such camera language should be hinting at something. Luo Nan discovered that the competitor, who had his head lowered all this time, had raised his head to stare at the display screen. His thin and pale face was revealed beneath the towel. He was unexpectedly calm and he continued to ignore Cragburst to the side. Chapter 109. The focus of the human-faced arachnid's attention was on the quiet and silent competitor. This person's age was about the same as Luo Nan's. His reserved and gloomy nature was about the same. However, the reason for the human-faced arachnid's attention was certainly not because of this. The feedback Luo Nan received was mostly anticipation and hunger. He was like a glutton, staring fixedly at a dish that was gradually cooking on the stove. He felt it was a pity to eat it, but he was impatient to not eat it. "This is the new food you've chosen?" Luo Nan had just been pondering over the changes in the human-faced arachnid's diet. Now he had a true reference. He couldn't help but spend a bit of energy to pay attention, but how could he understand it in a short period of time? And at this moment the camera turned. The strangely edited match ended and there was even a post-match scene next. The two competitors stood in the center of the fighting stage and Jack stood between them. It seemed that it was time to announce the victor. From the previous clips, the lanky kid's advantage was extremely clear, even though he had inexplicably less clips. He displayed an astonishing level of control. However, Jack wasn't in a hurry to announce the victor. He lowered his head to look at his watch. At this moment the background music of the edited scene strangely stopped. This caused the sharp whistles and whistles from all four sides of the stands to grow louder, more clamorous and more deafening. Finally Jack made a move. He spread his arms, but he didn't act like a normal referee, grabbing the competitor's hand. Instead he wrapped his arms around the shoulders of the two teenagers. It looked extremely intimate. But at this moment the children's bodies went rigid. Jack wasn't in a hurry to announce the victor. Instead he spoke like he was reciting a poem. His voice passed through a miniature microphone and spread throughout the entire arena. "As the referee, I must judge fairly. This is a conservative fight." The screams from the stands suddenly rose to a whole new level. A fight that has gone beyond time. The screams and cheers grew louder and louder. Some people even stood up and waved their arms towards the fighting stage. This spurred on even more people. Soon no one was sitting in the entire fighting arena. Jack's expression didn't change as he spat out his final judgment. A fake fight. The people in the stands went completely crazy. The chaotic clamor had already converged into a simple yet heart-sinking sound. Kill, kill, kill. On the fighting stage, the faces of the two teenagers were deathly pale. They wanted to struggle, but they were firmly clamped down by Jack's iron arms. Jack said with a smile, "There are no losers and there are no winners." Before he finished his sentence, Jack exerted force in both of his arms. The crisp sound of bones breaking was transmitted to the entire audience through the microphone on his body. The shoulder bones of the two youths instantly fell apart. A powerful force closed them up, crushing their sternum and spines. Then the two youths who were no longer human were forcibly hugged in front of Jack's chest, causing them to hug each other. A pair of faces that were bleeding from all 7 orifices collided with each other, and then softened into 2 piles of dead flesh. Jack relaxed his arms and the 2 corpses slid down. Without even looking, he crossed his arms and waved. Team ending friendly match. Pass. Faster see. Without waiting for the next scene to change, the display suddenly caved in and cracked. Cragburst's fist had directly smashed it apart. Such an intense reaction thoroughly exposed Cragburst's position. But how could he care? He spat again, a bunch of dregs. The quiet contestant turned his face. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes, but this emotion was extinguished before it could reach his face. In the end, he simply spat out 2 words. You guys. Cragburst stared at him with wide eyes. Kid, you want to participate in this bullshit fight? I'm the next one. Cragburst waved his hand roughly. Fuck the next one. Since I'm here, there will never be a next one. That way leads to the fighting arena, right? Cragburst was about to step out as he spoke. Not only was his sense of justice bursting, but the things that happened in this fighting arena made him, a fighting enthusiast, feel disgusted. Luo Nan helplessly called for Cragburst to stop when he saw that Cragburst was about to smash the fighting arena to pieces. This was already completely out of line with their original intentions, okay? I'm willing to bet that as soon as you enter the arena, Jack will immediately disappear without a trace. Even if you knock over everyone in the arena, what's the point of letting this murderer escape? That's the problem with your scouting. Why haven't you found that black-skinned rat yet? Cragburst made the same mistake as Luo Nan in his excitement. He forgot that he was communicating through the psychic wave network and directly spoke. The quiet competitor saw that Cragburst was talking to the air. His eyes streaked across the air and didn't see anything else. In the end, his eyes stopped on the crow on Cragburst's shoulder. He opened his mouth, a little hesitant, but finally said, Sir, are you talking to the crows? Cragburst stared blankly for a moment. He turned his head to look and said, baffled, yeah. Cragburst regretted it as soon as the words left his mouth. Such a reply was too stupid. But at that moment, the quiet contestant who had been expressionless all this while actually smiled. So it's Mr. Crow. Can I talk to him too? A slightly shaky smile and surprisingly childish words blossomed in the narrow lounge. It was also at this time that Cragburst and Luo Nan truly and clearly realized that this fighter, who was about to walk onto the fighting stage and receive fatal adjudication, was truly just a half-grown child. At the same time, the deathly still eyes of the 15 or 16-year-old boy in front of him flashed slightly. His entire body's life force and spiritual energy rippled out from his long and narrow eyes. Cragburst didn't know what to say when faced with such a face. In the end, he could only shrug his shoulders. Fine. If he's willing. Borrowing the force of Cragburst's shrug, ink flew and jumped, landing directly on the arm of the quiet contestant. Of course, this was under Luo Nan's indication. The quiet contestant was delighted by Ink's intelligence. Then he slightly straightened up and bowed very solemnly toward Ink. My name is Ruiwen. They call me Marauder, but I'm nothing more than a crow. This is my 100th match and it's also my last match. I hope that Mr. Crow can give me his blessings. This time there were a few more words. Luo Nan discovered that the quiet contestant was called Ruiwen, right? His voice was quite special. It seemed that his voice hadn't gone through puberty yet. There was a bit of sharpness within the hoarseness, and there was a natural resonance of breath. It was very unique. It made people feel that if he were to sing he would be quite good. Cragburst didn't quite understand. He tried to interrupt but was stopped by Luo Nan. This sort of feeling was far too familiar. The current Ruiwen was the same as Luo Nan many times. He was completely trapped in his own circle, forming his own logic. There was no need to forcefully break it. Perhaps this was the chance for him to relax the most. It was the moment he treasured the most. And at this time the human-faced arachnid began to stir. Within the eyes of this newly promoted glutton, there was a bright seed rising from the dark and desolate abyss. Even though the seed was bound and surrounded by the filthy and turbid streams, it was pure and untainted. It was pure and transparent. Chapter 110. Luo Nan's senses were synchronized with the human-faced arachnids. The human-faced arachnid was paying intense attention to Luo Nan. Such a strong stimulation also made some of the muddled information clear. Sure enough, the human-faced arachnid no longer treated the turbid flow of emotions as food after leaping from a plankton to a fish. What it was truly interested in right now was the spiritual seed that undulated up and down within the turbid flow. In reality, it was something that lived within the turbid flow of emotions, yet it was completely different from the turbid flow. It was something that possessed more vitality. It wasn't easy to form such a spiritual seed. One must have the mental cultivation to overcome filthy emotions and desires, as well as a basic positive attitude in order to finally take shape. Just like Rui when he had only been in embryonic form a long time ago. It wasn't until he spoke to Mr. Crow that he broke free from his deathly still and cold state of mind. Only then did this spiritual seed finally sublimate and leap to a new level. Cragburst actually had a similar spiritual seed as well, but it was hidden deep within his powerful magma-like life force. It wasn't as pure and transparent as Rui Wen's. From the perspective of the human-faced arachnid, the spiritual seed was an incomparable delicacy. Swallowing this spiritual seed was both a form of eating and evolution. Its evolution method was very lethal. It basically used the vitality and spirituality of others as nourishment. Its path of evolution was built on the foundation of destroying the hopes of others. Without a doubt, the human-faced arachnid was an existence that was evil to the extreme. Even if Luo Nan relied on its strength to a large degree, he would not deny this point. Although he did not deny it, it did not mean that he would allow it. Otherwise, what was the difference between it and the human-faced arachnid? Luo Nan's complete control over the human-faced arachnid was displayed without restraint. No matter how intense the human-faced arachnid's desire to eat was, the heavily chained crow shook, and it had to be well behaved. At this moment, someone walked in from the passageway that led to the fighting arena. The moment the door opened, the noise from the fighting arena almost overwhelmed the small resting room. Fortunately, it was quickly isolated again. That person said loudly, "Ruin, get ready to go on stage. The incomparable 100th match." Who are you?" "Your grandfather." Cragburst revealed an evil grin towards that person. Before that person could cry out in shock, Cragburst slapped him unconscious to the ground. Ruiwen turned a blind eye to this. He was already completely immersed in his own world. He stood up and gently swung his arms up and down. "Well, Mr. Crow, here comes my last battle. You won't be stingy with your blessings, right?" Swish. Perhaps it was because Ink was quite satisfied from being swayed, but Ink had already opened its mouth before Luo Nan could speak. Its hoarse voice was unpleasant to hear, but it made Ruiwen smile once more. He crossed his arms and walked over to Cragburst's side. He returned the ink. "Thank you, sir. You and Mr. Crow's arrival is my fortune." Nothing. With Cragburst's straightforward temperament, he really wasn't suited to dealing with a reserved and autistic person like Ruiwen. The logic of both sides was not on the same line. Luckily, Luo Nan extended a helping hand at this time. He gave Cragburst some advice, allowing Cragburst to ask for information, even though his words were very clumsy. "You just said 100 matches. Is there any special meaning to it?" "After 100 matches, I can choose to walk the path of judgment and leave the arena." It's all tricks and they've been used too much. Cragburst had seen similar situations far too many times in other underground arenas. Are there challenges on the road of adjudication? Of course. Who made it out in the past? Since the establishment of the fighting arena, the ones closest to 100 victories have been me and my brother. Oh right. I thank you for your praise before on behalf of him. Luo Nan and Cragburst thought of the skinny and tall youth who died under Jack's iron arm at the same time. Cragburst smashed his fist against his palm. Isn't the truth quite clear? What bullshit road of adjudication? This fighting arena never thought of letting you guys leave alive. The truth was indeed quite clear. This fighting arena was jointly established by a group of rich people and gangs of the recycling stratum. Contestants like Ruiwen were mostly poor orphans of the recycling stratum. They were controlled by gangs and underwent harsh training to fight each other to the death for the amusement of the rich. Cragburst hoped that Ruewen could clarify the truth. Leave? It's just a gimmick. A gimmick, nothing more. But Ruewen didn't respond. She just tore off the towel on top of her head, revealing her refreshing jet-black short hair. The contours of her face were actually quite delicate and pretty. Her delicate and pretty appearance was a bit out of place in this cruel beating arena. Cragburst was still persuading her. Hey, just join us. I'll take you to kill our way out. Ruewen walked forward in silence. Cragburst extended his hand in an attempt to grab her, but Ruewen didn't even turn her head. Only a cold and clear voice transmitted over, I'm going to kill our way out. I'm going to do it the way my brother and I did. Cragburst froze and stopped. Ruewen pushed open the soundproof door and walked out with large strides. DJ's resounding voice transmitted over. This is an unprecedented 100-victory battle. Our wing of death, the undefeated plunder, Ruewen. Cheers could be heard from the arena. Amidst the chaotic and distorted roars, there was a strange voice mixed with it. Male and female monsters. Flat-chested witches. Take it off completely. Verify her identity. Cragburst couldn't catch his breath properly. He choked and nearly caused ink to go askew. Luonan's soul body nearly lost its grip on the chain and let the human-faced arachnid charge out. Woman. I couldn't tell at all. Cragburst was stupefied in place. Who would have thought? Ruewen's upper body was bared from start to finish. Her attitude was natural and she didn't have any obvious secondary sexual characteristics. Even if she did, it would be submerged under the lines of her thin and hard muscles. Luonan was a bit embarrassed as well, but this awkward thought was forcibly severed when Ruewen stepped onto the fighting stage and exposed her thin body to the gazes of thousands of people. Cragburst held open the soundproof door that was about to close, so that the clamor of the fighting arena could be heard in an unending stream. Oh, I'll grant you the path to leave. Bye. Let's start the auction today. I want to taste the taste of the flat-chested witch. Cheers, clamor, and whistles rang out without end. Several hundred rich and powerful people who were likely to make a name for themselves in various fields used the body and life of this little girl to obtain stimulation that couldn't be obtained on the level of normal society. And Ruewen? The turbid flow of filth surged up from all directions. But that pure spiritual seed remained untainted by even a speck of dust. This girl, whose gender was hard to distinguish, had already been completely shielded from the influence of the filth of the outside world. But no matter what, why was such a girl placed in such a filthy place? Cragburst didn't make a sound as he walked forward with large strides. Luonan was a bit unable to restrain himself. He actually didn't stop Cragburst when he walked forward. Cragburst walked out of the passageway. It was reasonable to say that his large and unfamiliar face was the type that would attract a lot of attention. But right now, the vast majority of the people in the fighting arena had their attention focused on the fighting stage. They didn't notice Cragburst at all. But Ruewen, who was on the fighting stage, turned her head without any warning. Her cold and clear gaze made Cragburst halt once more. He wanted to advance, but he couldn't. Chapter 111. Ruewen quickly straightened her body and calmly stood in the center of the boxing ring. Her head was slightly drooped, allowing the rich and powerful people in the stands to wantonly size her up and evaluate her body. They constantly raised the stakes in the gambling house, causing the atmosphere to heat up even more. Cragburst's mouth didn't stop cursing the moment she walked through the tunnel. He turned his head to look at the spectator stands in all four directions. He just wanted to find someone he didn't like and give them a fierce beating. The problem was, there wasn't a single person in the entire arena that he didn't want to beat up. Has Jack been found yet? Cragburst paid special attention to the referee of this match. Unfortunately, it wasn't Jack. This made him even more vexed. Luonan didn't respond. Right now his mental senses had already covered the entire fighting arena. With this as the center, it covered a vast area with a radius of over 500 meters. It was equal to encompassing the greater half of the Deshang building within it. Even though the sensing range was slightly reduced due to the differences in the building materials and the interference of the radio waves, and the precision was still on the millimeter level, it was not a reason why Jack could not be captured. The modified human seemed to have completely evaporated. At this time Rui Wen's opponent was already on stage. Ignoring the string of meaningless titles, it was a stout and robust man who looked no less than 2 or 3 times bigger than Rui Wen. He didn't look like a 15 or 16-year-old child at all. However, the spectators in the stands were already used to it. They cheered and egged the contestant on as well. "Dope boy. Come on, powder keg, it's time to explode. They're going to do it on stage. They're so compatible." Luo Nan's attention was drawn back. He was a complete layman in the field of fighting. He only had a vague concept of heavyweight and the like. He couldn't help but worry for Rui Wen when he saw the eye-catching contrast of body shapes in the boxing ring. Cragburst was quite disdainful of the fat man, a fellow who uses drugs to stimulate his maturation. If he continues like this, he won't even need to go on stage. His own weight will crush his bones. But it had to be said that this sort of thing like drug stimulation was very common in the underground fighting arenas. Rui Wen might have also taken some sort of drug to suppress the development of her secondary sexual characteristics. Otherwise, as a girl with an innately deficient physique, it would have been very difficult for her to obtain 100 victories. When all was said and done, Cragburst and Luo Nan had no idea what was going on. In the end, Cragburst could only comfort him. "I'm here. Even if something unexpected happens, I can save him." Ink spread its wings and slapped Cragburst's face. This fellow didn't know how to talk. "Do we need you to save them?" The crux of the problem was that Rui Wen's current mental state and state were inconceivably clear and bright. But once she was destroyed by an external force, the damage to her mind would be extremely frightening. It would be much more troublesome than a pure physical injury. Luo Nan had just analyzed this point from the human-faced arachnid, but he was unable to explain it to Cragburst. He felt stifled to the extreme. The exchange between the two was meaningless, but the development of the fight on the boxing stage caught everyone off guard. After a full 20 minutes of prelude, atmosphere and bets, the battle began. Faced with an opponent who was at least twice as heavy as her, Rui Wen didn't retreat, but instead advanced. She rushed in from the front, and before Gunpowder Barrel's thick arms could close in, she had already broken his tibia with a single kick. Just as Gunpowder Barrel's fingers touched Rui Wen's shoulder, he lost his balance and fell to the ground in pain. Rui Wen easily broke away from his grasp and took the opportunity to kick him in the head, sending him into an unconscious state. The battle ended just like that. The originally heaven-flipping scene turned cold and silent in an instant. The vast majority of people, including the wealthy guests who won their bets, were unable to accept such a simple and laughable ending. They sunk into an awkward silence. Originally, the wagered fight was just a pastime. What they truly wanted to see was the cruel and bloody scene of fists hitting flesh. Cragburst's wild laughter and his celebratory action of raising his arms and brandishing his fists were exceptionally eye-catching under this bizarre atmosphere. Even the cameras that covered the entire arena gave him a close-up. Luo Nan wanted Ink to smack Cragburst's head. If this wasn't exposure, then what was? On the boxing stage, the referee was stupefied for a few seconds before going forward to examine the injury. This was just a formality. His true intention was to use this opportunity to get in contact with the person in charge and figure out what to do next. However, the big boss of the fighting arena, Jack, was unable to be contacted from beginning to end. In the end, it was the supervisor who spoke up and let the referee smooth things over first. The referee helplessly got up and grabbed Rui Wen's hand, preparing to announce the victor. But Rui Wen pushed his hand away. Then she borrowed the help of the referee's miniature microphone to say a few simple words. "I choose the road of adjudication." It was as if a bomb had been forcefully shoved into the oppressive and awkward atmosphere of the fighting arena with these words. First came the low clamor of several hundred people. Then came the sounds of cheering, laughing, cursing, and whistling. They flooded the entire fighting arena. The atmosphere exploded in an instant, wishing it could flip over the entire Deshang building. Aha! Challenger. Traitor. The flat-chested witch's counterattack. Stupid woman. Has your brain turned into muscle? Go die. Just tear her to shreds. No. Break her 4 limbs. Knock out her teeth. I want it. I want it. The several hundred rich and powerful spectators had personally drawn up the rules. They had designed a seemingly magnanimous path of escape. But when this rule was finally challenged, not many people could remain calm. The so-called magnanimity was just a symbolic footnote they made for their lofty status. Touching it was an offense. So in the end, all the emotions converged together to transform into a uniform howl. Adjudication. 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 The referee also returned to his senses from the unexpected change. He actually felt that he had been saved. A laughable battle that had been doused in cold water had suddenly turned into a large bomb that ignited everyone's emotions. Good. At this time, the projectors all over the fighting arena had already taken advantage of the opportunity to broadcast information related to the road of adjudication. Various images flashed in succession, listing the 3 deathly steps of King of Fists, Beast King Battle, and Adjudication Battle. The first 2 stages, as their names implied, were fights with true adult fighters and wild and untamed beasts. Only then was it the 3rd stage. The projector timely displayed the image of a calm and callous white man wearing a referee uniform, Adjudicator Jack. The gang leader here, the gold medal host, the referee, and the murderer who had killed Rui Wen's brother, was precisely the boss of the final stage. Each projector also timely displayed the scene of many contestants, including Rui Wen's brother, dying at the hands of this callous referee. The fighting arena emitted a sharp whistling sound with each life disappearing until it finally stopped at the scene of Jack waving his hands and denying everything. The entire fighting arena was about to boil over. Chapter 112. Luo Nan's soul body stood towering amidst this wanton and rushing torrent of emotions. Originally he should have been angry, but from his unique perspective he saw Rui Wen, who continued to stand silently on the fighting stage after her words. He also saw her spiritual seed that was submerged in the turbid flow, yet remained untainted from beginning to end by a speck of dust. A wondrous calm arrived. Just like this, Luo Nan looked down from high above, coldly looking down at the several hundred warped faces. His mental senses were like a large net that didn't let anything through. It covered every nook and cranny within a 500-meter radius. At the same time, it included the emotional movements of every single person. The vast majority of people were fanatical, but there were some people who were a bit special. For example, this person was a bit impatient. Luo Nan's attention naturally shifted. This was a certain VIP room in the upper part of the fighting arena. A man dressed in a suit and leather shoes was pacing endlessly in the room shouting, Jack? Damn it. I know you heard me. The high-priority communicator crackled with static extremely clearly. A voice transmitted back approximately 2 seconds later. What's up? Found it. Luo Nan instantly focused his attention, increasing his precision in all aspects. He felt that it wasn't enough, so he simply shifted his soul body over. He was in the VIP room, sticking to the back of the contact's neck to receive the message from the communicator. The contact was excited to finally get in touch with that damn Jack. He never would have thought that there was a spirit behind him that was receiving the message at the same time as him. In fact, the information Luo Nan received far exceeded that of the contact. After increasing his precision, Luo Nan was able to see not only the tangible substance, but he was also able to capture the interweaving electrical waves in the air. It was impossible for Luo Nan to know the information transmitted by the electrical waves due to his lack of the ability to transform and analyze. However, he was able to refer to the continuous interweaving and spreading fluctuations within the communicator to determine the approximate direction. This was his first attempt, but it wasn't easy to realize a tracking in the information society where countless electrical waves interweaved and covered. Fortunately, the contact and Jack continued to communicate. The contact explained to Jack in as much detail as he could. During this time, the buzzing noise of interference continued to ring. The quality of the call was extremely bad. In the end, the contact didn't even know what he said. Damn it, Jack. Where the hell are you? On the road to heaven. Jack sounded like he was doing some sort of exercise. His voice was a bit breathless. Now isn't the time for jokes. You must come back. Immediately. I was just about to touch heaven. To hell with heaven. Rui Wen wants to charge through the path of adjudication. Who is Rui Wen? Didn't you say that any news related to this woman must be reported to you immediately? There was a sudden silence on the other side. After a full 5 seconds, Jack finally replied, Who was in the first 2 stages? The contact was overjoyed to see that Jack finally understood the seriousness of the matter. He quickly continued to report the latest situation. The first obstacle is De Rong, our chief combat coach. This pass is meaningless. Next stage. But, oh my god. The tycoons in the fighting arena all screamed like they'd gone mad. This was because Rui Wen had paid the price of bruising her wrist just a second ago. She'd made another terrifying close-quarters assault. Her knee had fiercely smashed into Rongda's crotch. This robust man's physique wasn't inferior to crag bursts as he bent over in pain. Her elbow smashed into his throat, smashing his entire Adam's apple into mush. The fractured bones were displaced and she cut open his carotid artery. Asphyxiation and arterial bleeding caused this strong man to fall to the ground, twitching as he quickly walked towards death. Rui Wen gazed at the dying man on the ground and said softly, "For the 70% eliminated." The contact was already stupefied from watching. He couldn't bear this kind of loss any longer. Rongda was once the champion of the Underground Fighting Alliance. She must have concealed her strength. What the hell is going on here? Who taught her? Damn it, damn it, damn it. Jack already understood everything from the contact's reaction. He issued orders with a hoarse voice. Raise the protective walls on all fronts right now. Isolate the fighting arena. Tell that group of trash that we need a certain amount of time to prepare for the Beast King battle. Prepare for what? You go contact Mr. Ma. Tell him that the high-quality life and death duel he's been dreaming of has arrived. We'll send out the 100 victory witch Rui Wen. He only needs to bring his family's little darling over. I'll give him 10 minutes of time. Oh, Mr. Ma's collection. Jack, you're really too evil. The contact came to a sudden realization. He greatly praised Jack's way of thinking. He immediately hung up and hastily went to find someone. Rui Wen. Forget it. I'll just go with her cheap older brother. Jack removed his wristband and casually tossed it to the side. Don't anyone disturb me again. He was suddenly startled before his voice fell. He slowly raised his head. His undamaged right eye and the mechanical electronic eye focused at the same time. They stared at the empty space in front of them. He finally found it. Luo Nan's soul body appeared in this room. He also noticed Jack's reaction, but right now he was even more shocked at Jack's current location. Jack was still inside the Deshang building, but he was on the top floor of the building, the 141st floor. This landmark building of the River Wu district had a height of around 600 meters. The 141st floor was over 550 meters in height. It just so happened to exceed the range of Luo Nan's all-encompassing perception. Originally Luo Nan didn't believe that Jack would leave his usual lair and enter the privileged society that was absolutely unfriendly to gangsters like them. But the facts proved that his judgment was wrong. Not only did Jack enter, but he also arrived at the top floor of the Deshang building, which required extremely high credit privileges. He even had an independent training room here. At this moment Jack was sitting in the middle of a pitch-black device whose purpose could not be seen. His body was connected to many wires and powerful electric currents were piercing his body at every moment. Some of them even pulled out beautiful blue electric currents in the air. Is it charging the altered human right now? Jack's eyes were constantly changing focus. The end of the air was a wall. But before the wall, there was a reaction that made him vigilant. It appeared without end. A special scanner was installed in his body. The naked eye and the electronic eye received light waves of all frequencies and compared them with the surrounding environment. The data was calculated and processed to form an image. In the end, what appeared on his optic nervous system was an image that was as fuzzy as a shadow. He paused for a moment before speaking in a hoarse voice. Ability user? Soul configuration? Luo Nan was truly shocked. The electromagnetic gun attack on the recycling stratum really wasn't a coincidence. This Jack seemed to have some sort of method that could capture the existence of a soul body. His soul body floated a few times in the room. He discovered that although Jack's gaze was a bit sluggish, it was always able to rapidly change. This was a situation that had never happened before. Chapter 113. In the end, Jack was the first to break the silence. He stared at the empty space and said in a low voice, I don't know who you are and I don't know which force you belong to, but I can confirm that there was no enmity between us before today. I admire your ability and I don't want to be your enemy. If you're unhappy with today's conflict, I'm willing to make amends. Whatever you want, I will do my best to satisfy you within my capabilities. The only response he got was the buzzing sound of the electric current. Jack paused for a moment before continuing. Your soul configuration has yet to reach the level where your mind can interfere with matter. My nervous system has been modified and your influence on me is negligible. Yes, there's also that big guy. He's a very headache-inducing opponent. Perhaps he's currently rushing over, but inside the Deshang building, I'll make his pace slow like a turtle. If we can't come to an agreement, we'll just have to drag it out. Maybe until tomorrow morning? Luo Nan still did not respond. There was no way to respond even if he wanted to. Jack was right about one thing. At present he only had two means of communication. One was the psychic wave network and the other was the local network of the format pyramid. Neither of them were useful to Jack. It was as if Jack's consciousness was hidden under a thick layer of ice water. He could reach it, but he had used up too much of his strength halfway through. It was almost nothing. Luo Nan didn't know how Jack did it. He simply blocked out Jack's voice and scanned the entire room in an attempt to discover more information. Of course, the most eye-catching thing in this training room was the pitch-black machine outside of Jack's body. With Luo Nan's meager knowledge of machinery, it was very hard for him to understand the ultimate purpose of the machine. And from the surface, it looked like the machine was just an unending stream of electricity being poured into Jack's body. Luo Nan paid attention to the voltage indicator. Any normal person would have turned into charcoal by now, but Jack seemed to be enjoying it. It could be seen that the electric current instilled by the black machine had truly cut into every part of Jack's body. Jack's muscles were twitching and trembling every second, but within this twitching and trembling, there was clearly a relatively stable rhythm. This meant that Jack had retained some control over his body. What did he just say? On the way to heaven. It was clear that such an electric infusion was beneficial to Jack. Oh, in that case, Jack continued to chatter endlessly while Luo Nan was gathering information. I get it. You can't open your mouth, right? The research on soul configuration on Earth is still very backward. Or are you just a talented person who got lucky? Very well then. I can probably guess what you are more interested in. Intelligence, information, all kinds of knowledge that can broaden your horizons. For example, right now, I can tell you that you can use the special waveband of your soul configuration to communicate with me. This is because my body has been implanted with the corresponding transceiver. Even if I haven't used it for 2 to 3 years, it shouldn't be damaged. We can try it now. You just need to focus your mind. You have the talent to form a soul configuration, so it should be easy for you to do this. The void was silent for about 5 seconds. Then Jack smiled. The psychic waves from the outside world were converted into recognizable information through the transceiver in his body, ringing in his ears. I can now believe that you are indeed not from the military. If the military possessed a similar transformation project, then they wouldn't be in such a difficult situation when facing the dark side or life forms. Jack maintained his smile, making the scar on his face look less sinister. Of course, there is a certain difference between soul configuration and darksider life forms. We can talk about it in detail later. You really do know a lot. Luo Nan expressed his admiration for Jack's ability to bring up new information at any moment. That's why I'm a very good information peddler. Jack continued to speak with fervor and assurance. What do we talk about? All right. Let's talk about why we became enemies. I think you will certainly be interested in that pretty boy Yan Yongbua. Now that you mention it, I find that I know too much. Luo Nan sneered. Yes, this fellow buried countless hooks in his words. What earth, soul configuration, psychic wave transceiver. But in reality, there was practically no valuable information that he revealed. So a second later, Luo Nan directly said, let's talk about that metal beetle. The smile on Jack's lips widened. Friend, you must be quite young. You must know that communication shouldn't be done in a fit of pique. You should think of ways to embarrass the other party. I know that you must be more interested in Yan Yongbua. Otherwise, you wouldn't have followed him. Let me think. What is his explosive point? For example, Quantum Corporation? Archetype format? The world's first burner? Or perhaps Deep Blue World? You must be a master storyteller. Luo Nan used psychic waves to send a mocking message. But he had no choice but to admit that the titles that Jack mentioned had nearly caused his curiosity to explode. It was as if he had bumped into a moving database of information. This fellow Jack was absolutely not a simple gang leader. His experiences, knowledge, and even the level of contact he had had with him far exceeded Luo Nan's previous estimations. However, let's just leave it at that for now. Jack's smile continued to persist, but a short second later, astonishment and explosive rage tore apart this layer of mask, arriving together with the darkness that enveloped the room. A power outage. The low humming of the pitch-black machine gradually came to a stop. The power outage protection was done quite well. The muscles on Jack's body only twitched a bit before returning to normal. But his mood couldn't return. Damn it. What did you do? Jack roared in the darkness. He did his best to shake his arms, but this didn't give him a sliver of electricity. It's as you can see. The power is out. Luo Nan used the method that Jack taught him to maintain communication. Jack's choice of the top floor of the Deshang building as a hiding place was indeed an unimaginably brilliant move. However, as a business district with people coming and going, there were uncontrollable factors. To put it more bluntly, there were far too many human factors. Hypnosis combined with the human-faced arachnid's fishing technique was truly too useful. Luo Nan just spent a bit of time while Jack chattered on endlessly. He chose a property manager and cut off the power supply to this floor. During this time he discovered that Jack's training room used a dedicated power supply line. But this point was meaningless in front of the manager of the building. Reality proved that no matter what function the machine Jack used, it could only be a pile of scrap metal once the power supply was cut off. I want to obtain information. You want to obtain time. The meaning of communication lies in this. But no one can obtain it. So what? It seemed that the last remnant images of his peers in the boxing ring still remained before Luo Nan's eyes. He didn't care whether or not Jack could see them. His soul body made the same negative action of crossing its arms. Chapter 114. As the last bit of electric current disappeared in the darkness, Jack's intense movements also stopped. He sat in the middle of the machine and the wires on his body broke off one after another. In the end, all that was left was a violent gasp. The interruption of the power supply seemed to have placed an unexpected burden on Jack. However, his bionic eyes didn't dim because of the power cut. On the contrary, they became more and more dazzling as his emotions fluctuated. While panting, Jack emphasized again, "You arrogant bastard. Damn it. Do you know what you've done? I did something that made you very unhappy and I plan to continue doing it." This was what Luo Nan said and this was what he did. The human-faced arachnid who had just completed its mission had already passed through the wall and returned to Luo Nan's side. Under Luo Nan's guidance, the human-faced arachnid threw itself at Jack. Luo Nan could now confirm that Jack's previous words weren't a lie. There really was a certain difference between soul bodies and darksider life forms. Jack was clearly able to lock onto the soul body, but he was completely unaware of the arrival of the human-faced arachnid. This was despite the fact that half of the human-faced arachnid's body was about to merge into his body. But on the other hand, the human-faced arachnid couldn't seem to find a place to eat Jack. Even though Jack was enraged to the point of madness, his special soul defense was still working. Right now, the human-faced arachnid was at best a probing imaging device. Even if it could clearly probe the inner workings of Jack's brain, it wouldn't be able to create any interference. It also lacked interest. The human-faced arachnid really had no interest in Jack at all. It wasn't because the low-level turbid flow of emotions was no longer part of its menu. It was because this thing simply couldn't be eaten. It was like an excellent painter could paint a flower so lifelike that it would attract bees and butterflies, but he would never be able to pick the honey. This was the difference between a real object and a painting, the difference between reality and illusion. From the human-faced arachnid's perspective, Jack's emotions were a vivid yet false picture. It could be seen that the structure and operation of Jack's brain, which had been partially modified, were shockingly concise and efficient. What kind of stimulation would trigger which cluster of neurons, what kind of neurotransmitters would be produced, and what kind of conduction between neurons would be triggered, forming a continuous running assembly line. At first glance, this was no different from a normal person's mental model. But as a matter of fact, Most of the emotions and psychological activities of human beings had complicated operating mechanisms. The coordinated activation of various brain regions was far from something that could be replaced by an ideal assembly line. If one were to delve deeper into this, they would discover that Jack's seemingly efficient and concise operation mode was more of an encoding method. The human-faced arachnid's probing was extraordinarily deep. The human-faced arachnid's tentacles had already spread to every nook and cranny of Jack's body without his knowledge. Because of this, it discovered a region that had been precisely modified in the depths of Jack's brain, probably at the location of the central mass that connected the left and right thalamus. There was an even smaller core embedded within it. Almost all of Jack's nerve activities would be transmitted through the channels that had been set up in advance to exchange information with the nucleus. This nucleus would transmit the corresponding stimulation to the various nerve centers and then give feedback. Without a doubt, this core played the role of a system integration. All kinds of codes were substituted into the formula to form the answer and then transmitted out. This was originally a natural function of the brain, but it had been replaced by the mechanical reaction of the nucleus. This crucial step was the distinction between real and fake. Were all altered humans like this? Luo Nan didn't have too much confidence in his own observations. He was still guessing at the role of the nucleus. However, there was a situation that firmly grabbed his attention. There was a thin thread coiled around this extremely secretive nucleus body. No, it was the metal beetle. That's right, this was the metal beetle that Yen Yonghua had tossed out of the car. Luo Nan was incomparably certain because there was a small half of the beetle shape preserved at the end of the thin thread. He couldn't help but speculate that the metal beetle would completely disappear after a period of time. It would transform into the form of a thin thread. What were the conditions for the transformation? Luo Nan could more or less understand just by looking at the dark machine that had already stopped operating. It was also this coiled thread that gave Luo Nan an extremely familiar feeling. He used the human-faced arachnid as a medium to unleash his soul clairvoyance. He discovered that the thread clearly flickered with flickering electricity. And when he increased the precision of his senses a step further, he was certain that the thread had already split into countless even finer branches. Many of them had already exceeded the range of precision of his senses. Luo Nan could only see that some of these branches had pierced into the interior of the nucleus. Some of them had even seeped into the nerves and blood vessels. They had probably already spread throughout the entire brain, forming a tree-shaped structure with the nucleus as the center. This is the external neuron? What the fuck are you doing now? Luo Nan's unbridled probing methods had probably set off some sort of alarm device. Jack was horrified and startled. His blood-red robotic eyes locked rigidly onto the location of Luo Nan's soul body. But compared to these things on the surface, the changes that had occurred within Jack's brain were what truly shook Luo Nan's mind. It was that thin thread that had split into countless branches. The thin thread pierced into various parts of Jack's brain. It instantly trembled with tightly woven electrical fire. The electrical fire didn't occur on the plane of reality. At least it wasn't limited to just that. This was because the human-faced arachnid that was deep within felt a burning sensation that was enough to endanger its existence at this very moment. It didn't need Luo Nan's command to frantically retreat outwards. Jack's mood template of rage had certainly been adjusted to the highest level. His entire body stood up, and it was also at this moment that his body clearly emitted a dark and deep glow of flames. The glow of flames came from the inside out, forcibly blasting the human-faced arachnid out of Jack's body. Moreover, the human-faced arachnid's momentum didn't decrease in the slightest as it pounced towards Luo Nan's location. The human-faced arachnid let out a pained howl. The powerful attack on the mental plane instantly swept through the many floors of the Deshang building. It was unknown how many people were innocently affected in this instant. Luo Nan was already unable to care about these things. The instant the glow of flames erupted, he exhausted all of the strength of his soul to leap through the air. Luo Nan was transported in a dizzying manner, but the distance he flew was far below Luo Nan's estimations. He just flew out of the room. The entire distance didn't exceed 20 meters. An incorporeal magnetic field formed around Jack's body when the glow of flames erupted. It warped the mental plane and even the space of reality. It was as if Luo Nan's soul body had fallen into a bottomless deep sea. An astonishing pressure came from all directions. This feeling was far too familiar. On the warship a few days ago, the burning wraith that He Yuan had beheaded had suffered a similar technique. It had been locked onto, controlled, and then turned into ashes. Luo Nan's mind truly trembled as if electricity had passed through it. Chapter 115. You Can't Escape. Jack's hoarse voice was like the low cry of a deep-sea monster. It penetrated through the walls, shaking Luo Nan's soul body to the point of being slightly shaken. Was this guy really a burner? Based on the information that Luo Nan knew, burners were not like this. At the very least, the burners under Yen Hong's archetype formatting theory were not like this. Otherwise, there would be no need for the deep blue platform or the exoskeleton armor. He could just modify his entire body. However, what Jack had displayed was indeed the power of the format of fire. In the next second, the thick and heavy walls of the training room rumbled and violently deformed. A hole had been blasted open in the center and cracks spread out like a spider web. Jack's training room was located in the middle of the 141st floor. It was a space sealed off by 4 thick and heavy soundproof walls. Only one side had an open door. The direction Luo Nan chose to jump in was the opposite of the main door. He stretched out the normal path of pursuit to the greatest extent. However, Jack's choice was completely different from a normal person's. Using Jack as a reference, Luo Nan was actually really affected by the human mindset. He should have gone up or down just now. There was a floor separating them. Even if there was interference from the magnetic field, the situation would be completely different. Luo Nan didn't have the mind to reflect on his actions. He still tried to pull away, but the pressure his soul body endured continued to rise, making it difficult for him to move forward. Hell, even the military's burners, with the support of their exoskeleton armor, didn't have this kind of power. The wall exploded with a bang following another heavy strike. Jack walked out with large strides. His naked eye and bionic eye locked firmly onto Luo Nan's position. At this moment, the scene of flames soaring around his body had already disappeared, but the magnetic field that was like the deep sea was even more powerful. Through soul observation, he could confirm that Jack's entire body was deeply integrated with the deep sea EM field. The energy circulating within his body endlessly increased the effectiveness of the magnetic field. And the exertion of strength with every movement could bring about an intense change in the magnetic field. This was undoubtedly a terrible experience for Luo Nan. Jack stared at the direction where the soul was. His rage seemed to have been controlled and his voice became hoarse and deep. Young man, do you know how great of a price I paid in order to obtain the Deep Sea Type 4 Dynamo Core? Do you know how much your naughty behavior will cost me? Dynamo Core? Is that the official name for the external neuron? Also, does this model also represent the corresponding ability? Just like the deep sea EM field that Jack was radiating, Luo Nan unconsciously pondered over this word, and Jack didn't immediately attack him. Instead, he sized up the surroundings with a somewhat uncertain appearance. Ability users nowadays are really amazing. I actually saw a young man who can raise a Darksider life form. Moreover, that breed seems to be quite interesting. Jack should be probing. Though he had injured the human-faced arachnid, he was still unable to capture its whereabouts. Luo Nan responded with silence. His attitude made Jack laugh coldly. Alright, I'll add this incident to my database and tell it to people who are willing to listen to my story. As for you, I have no desire to communicate at all. The exact same words were returned to him by Jack. If it was in the past, Luo Nan would have felt that Jack's words were sharp. But right now he couldn't help but think. Was this Jack's free will, or was it the result of an artificial intelligence's calculations? This riddle would not be solved in a short amount of time. Luo Nan deeply felt Jack's murderous intent. He didn't hesitate any longer. He concentrated all of his energy and fled regardless of everything. This time he learned from his previous lesson and directly fled to the bottom of the floor. Though the distance was even more pitiful than last time, less than 4 meters, the floor was constructed from a combination of concrete and high-strength light alloy. It was much tougher than the wall material that Jack had smashed apart. Jack's attack smashed down and the floor instantly caved in, but it didn't immediately collapse. Luo Nan took advantage of this opportunity to dive down another floor. The straight-line distance between him and Jack had already increased to over 30 meters. The binding power of the deep CEM field suddenly weakened. Luo Nan's heart was filled with joy. He was about to forcefully leap through space once more. This time his target was the night sky outside of the Deshang building. As long as he reached the void where there was nothing to rely on, Jack wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Then a muffled bang rang out and the bullet, which possessed powerful kinetic energy, instantly pierced through 2 floors of the floor. Even though the bullet deviated a bit in the process of piercing through, it still exploded near Luo Nan's soul body. The churning cloud of fire had the effect of a magnetic field, giving his soul body enormous interference. Luo Nan had seen similar special ammunition on the warship before, but the effect of this round was clearly stronger. And the ammunition wasn't just one round. It was a continuous barrage of bullets. All of them passed through the hole that had just been pierced through, exploding in succession. For a time the cloud of fire pervaded the air, igniting a few flammable items on the floor. The 2 floors of the floor were forcibly smashed through in this one delay. Jack flew down just like that. The powerful deep CEM field had already enveloped Luo Nan before he even arrived. It was as if Luo Nan's soul body had been thrown into the deep sea once more. It suddenly became sluggish and difficult to move. And this time the temperature at the bottom of the sea rose crazily. It was like a volcano erupting in the sea wanting to cook him thoroughly. Luo Nan suddenly felt a sense of weakness as he sank into it. It came from nothing and it gradually became clear. It wasn't that Jack's format of fire or the deep CEM field caused great harm to his soul body. Instead, the human-faced arachnid who acted as an external fuel tank had received heavy damage from the first wave of attacks. It had yet to recover. Luo Nan hadn't truly reached the standard of an out-of-body state. He was able to roam freely in the form of a soul body. To a large extent he had to rely on the energy provided by the human-faced arachnid. Jack's format of fire exploded, inadvertently striking Luo Nan's vital point. This wasn't good. And at this time Jack's grand action of tearing down walls and setting them on fire finally triggered a response from the building's defense system. Right now the floor the two were on was the office area of a certain large company. It was the weekend so there wasn't a single person inside. The first to respond was the building's automatic mechanical security system. The door to the office area rumbled open following the simultaneous activation of the fire alarm and burglary alarm lights. A civilian defense robot drove into the room. The barrel of its anti-riot gun was aimed at the only visible target, Jack. The problem was that the anti-riot gun hadn't even fired when the robot received a brand new command. It entered a docile standby state. Then the fire alarm and the burglary alarm all stopped. The building recovered its silence. Only the office items that had been set ablaze within the flames were left to burn. Jack didn't even turn his head during this entire process. He just stared dead at the location of Luo Nan's soul body. Chapter 116. Ronan had witnessed the entire process of Jack controlling the situation. It was as if Jack was holding a remote control for action and stop. With just a press, the security system of the entire floor or even the entire building froze. This scene absolutely wasn't the result of Jack's high level of authority in the Deshang building. This was because the robot didn't have any procedures to test his authority. It directly ceased all activities and didn't have any power to resist. This made Luo Nan think of Cragburst's pitiful jeep. Luo Nan finally broke his silence. He used psychic waves to transmit. How did you do it? Oh, another exchange. Jack sneered. Why are you making a fuss? Can control. Oh, and Darksider life forms. I can control machinery. That's fair. Jack didn't refuse to communicate, but he didn't respond directly either. He didn't mind dealing with Luo Nan a bit more. After all, he couldn't find any traces of the Darksider life form from beginning to end. This caused him to brood over it. He needed time to adjust the relevant parameters of the database and unceasingly revise the range of his detection. Luo Nan could more or less guess what Jack was doing. After all, many of Jack's detection methods required the use of that electronic eye, so Jack was constantly turning his head. This was good news. It seemed that Jack was very afraid of the Darksider life form. Perhaps there was still a threat to the current him? Luo Nan secretly paid attention to this, But right now a large portion of his mind couldn't help drifting in the direction of controlling machinery. Jack and Yen Yongbua's previous actions reminded him of another similar example. Gear's underground laboratory. To put it more bluntly, the external neuron. Luonan could confirm that the thread in Jack's brain was indeed the external neuron. It was also the dynamo core that Luonan spoke of. It was this product that seemed to surpass the technology of Earth that allowed it to bypass all authority and directly control all information devices, manipulating them at will. And now, new facts told him that other than the aforementioned functions, this thing was also the key to the burner and format of fire. Such a strange creation had actually accompanied him for 5 years, and it was mailed to him by that coward. What did that mean? What did that mean? It was hard for Luonan to divert his attention to ponder over this matter during the violent storm of pursuit and escape. Now that he had the slightest bit of time, the relevant thoughts were like heart-devouring bugs, gnawing and grinding in his heart. External neuron, dynamo core, burners, gang leader, Yen Yongbua, quantum corporation, and that coward. Luonan's mind was practically tied into a dead knot by the sudden clues and bursts of information. If he didn't loosen up a bit, then his soul would suffocate. Luonan suddenly felt very regretful. Perhaps he really should have listened to Jack's 2 more stories. No matter what, he wanted to know what kind of connection there was between Jack, the mafia leader, and that coward. Right now, Luonan had to work hard for this goal. He did his best to maintain a clear line of thought. He used psychic waves to transmit information as slowly as possible to probe Jack's reaction. Controlling machines at will? You don't have that ability. Otherwise, you wouldn't be hiding in the recycle stratum as a mafia boss. Instead, you'd be running out to do whatever you want. Jack laughed hoarsely. Are you trying to provoke me? Kid, you've already succeeded before, so you don't have to worry about how you die. I admit that you have the ability to kill me. After all, you are already a burner. What, did I say something wrong? Luonan saw Jack grin from the corner of his mouth. The sarcasm within was thick. Jack shrugged his shoulders. It's nothing. People always have the right to be ignorant. I don't have the obligation to correct them. Kid, there's no need to probe anymore. Call your pet. I'll give you a more satisfying death. Luonan would be stupid to listen to Jack's words. But Jack's sarcastic smile and tone were quite interesting. It was a kind of aloof superiority. The people he spoke of didn't seem to be specifically referring to Luonan. Instead, it was an unbridled map cannon. It was brimming with the flavor of, everyone in the world is drunk, but I am the only sober one. Luonan remembered that a considerable portion of Jack's high-level mental activity originated from the data template of the nucleus. In a certain sense, Jack was more real than any normal person. Then where did this sense of superiority come from? Luonan sized up Jack once more. The information he obtained from the mafia members showed that this savage and cruel fellow had become the mafia leader of this region in just a span of 2 to 3 years. He started off as a fighting instructor. He used the bloody 70% elimination rule to rapidly become an important figure in the fighting arena. Then he became a referee, a host, a partner, and finally became the chief spokesperson of the fighting arena's mafia power. His abilities overflowed as a mafia leader, but this didn't mean that he was the same in other areas. Then, it's the metal beetle, right? Luonan suddenly spoke up and went straight to the point. Jack was a bit startled, then he laughed. Are you still going to be angry, young man? Luonan ignored Jack's interference. His thoughts were so certain that everything that happened within Jack's body was exposed to the prying eyes of the human-faced arachnid. Yen Yongbua used it to control our jeep and then you came over to deal with it. But you're clearly more interested in the metal beetle itself. Oh, the metal beetle is too unprofessional. You call it the dynamo core? The deep sea type 4 dynamo core. It's a mystical device that allows ordinary altered humans to possess abilities similar to a burner. Jack was silent for a moment. The dark red electronic eyes that had been searching for the human-faced arachnid turned back to stare at the blurry figure of Luonan's soul body. You're trying to display your own intelligence? But we don't recruit new people here. The intensity of the deep CEM field continued to increase as Jack spoke. Luonan's soul body felt even worse. From Luonan's perspective, the most important thing to do right now was to break free from Jack's control as quickly as possible and flee far away. However, the spiritual light gushing out from his mind interweaved into sections of thought. Under the pressure of the outside world, he pieced them together and advanced layer by layer. He was unwilling to interrupt this process. The dynamo core is very precious to you, so Yen Yongbo will use it to pay you. But looking at the model number, this should be a product that has already been put into production. At the very least, it's a trial production series of products. The only ones who possess this kind of manufacturing ability and are closely related to the burner are Quantum Corporation and their related powers. Luo Nan's brain power operated. It had certainly reached the pinnacle of his 15 years of life. He didn't directly converse with Jack. Instead, he endlessly tossed out a few bait in his words. At the same time, he earnestly observed all of Jack's reactions, using them to revise his own inferences. Of course, there's also you. You're an altered human, but you don't come from the military. You just happen to be so adaptable to the burner's abilities. The number of people in this world who can do this can be counted on one hand. So I believe that you also come from Quantum Corporation and that you've always worked for the apex technology company of this earth. Luo Nan saw Jack's face reveal a mocking smile of superiority just as the psychic wave message was transmitted. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.